All right. Welcome, everyone. Hello. This is our second Career Insights of our spring semester. My name is Jorales Canales. I am an advisor and program coordinator at Beyond Barnard. And we are going to get started in just a moment. As you can see, we have our fellow graduates here to talk about their current career paths and the various roles that they have within government and public policy. Just as a reminder, feel free to put questions in the chat. We will have some time to get to it at the end of our program. And like I mentioned, this program will be recorded and sent to all registered students sometime at the end of this week. So if you wanted to look back at it or rewatch the program, you are more than welcome to. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get started because we only have an hour and it goes really quickly. So I am going to call on our panelists to start introducing themselves. So if you all can just introduce yourself, talk a little bit about what you're currently doing in your role, as well as how you got there and kind of like your career trajectory, so to speak. So I'm going to start with Katherine.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Katherine Kazarian. I'm a Barnard College graduate of 2012. I currently serve in the Rhode Island State Legislature, and I also serve as the House Majority Whip. So I got started in politics. I never, ever thought I would run for office, but I actually was inspired at my Barnard College commencement. We had President Barack Obama speak at our commencement. The class of 2012 was very, very lucky. And his whole speech was about young women getting involved in public office, helping your hometown communities, really about getting your seat at the head of the table and making an impact for change. So I went home to Rhode Island, very inspired. Went home very inspired, ran for office, had helped out on political campaigns before in the past, never envisioned myself doing it, but knocked on every door, talked to the people in the district and won, and have been serving in the Rhode Island State Legislature ever since. I fully credit Barnard with taking me on this career path, and I do love it. Working in the Rhode Island General Assembly, you get something new every day, but have been glad to work on legislation about codifying Roe v. Wade, passing Act on Climate, a big bill to try and combat climate change here in Rhode Island, and also a personal bill for me. I have of Armenian ancestry, mandating the teaching of the Armenian genocide in schools. So really, full breadth of things I've done in the state legislature. Just happy to be on the panel and talk to some Barnard students and hear how I can help you guys and anybody interested in politics.
Thank you so much, Katherine. What a commencement speaker. I also wish I was here for that. And Katherine, really quick, what did you study while you were at Barnard?
Great question. I studied urban studies and economics.
Urban studies.
Great department. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you so much. And I'll have Lizzie go next.
Hi, everybody. Lizzie Hodges McQuade. I graduated from Barnard in 2002. And I studied architecture and art history while I was there. I went on a couple years later to get a master's degree in architecture and finished that program in 2007 and worked for about 15 years in the world of engineering and design and worked on a lot of like the design and construction of a lot of public buildings during that time. And I had an opportunity throughout that work to develop research projects thinking about coastal planning, both in New York and on the Eastern Seaboard at large. And even though those projects were sort of applied research, self-directed and a little bit extracurricular to the work that I was doing in design and construction, I was able to use what I learned in that space and transition my career and take on a job working for New York City in the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice. I've only been here for about half a year, so it's a new space for me, but I'm delighted to have brought everything I learned from a different sort of career path into a new space in government.
Thank you so much, Lizzie. And yeah, I'm brand new into that. So that is awesome to hear. And it sounds like a really exciting role. Sasha, I'll have you go next.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. My name is Sasha Feldstein. I am the Economic Justice Director for an organization here in California where I'm based called the California Immigrant Policy Center. So kind of as counter or related to what Katherine does, we work on the advocacy side of things. So we work to build coalitions to call on our state legislature and the governor to pass laws to protect immigrant rights. And I oversee our economic justice portfolio. So my work is around workforce development, future of work issues, workers' rights issues, and especially in light of COVID, really making sure that our undocumented community members who've been excluded from a lot of federal relief during this pandemic can be included in some of our state relief efforts. And I had a very circuitous career path. I don't know if any of you might identify with this, but I was a psychology and human rights major at Barnard. And I graduated knowing that I wanted to do some good in the world, and that was about it. And so I explored things like legal advocacy, social work, or community organizing, trying to kind of get at this from a lot of different issues. But I really realized that for me, at least, policy advocacy was where I wanted to be. It allows me to kind of combine direct service, kind of on the ground, interpersonal relationships, but also looking at the bigger picture. And I definitely think that going to Barnard and living in New York and having access to all of the opportunities that I did there, but also having grown up and then going on to live in two of the biggest cities in the country, with some of the highest levels of wealth, but also the highest levels of inequality, really helped me think about these issues on a wider scale.
Thank you so much, Sasha. Lucia, I'll go right down the line.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Lucia Solorzano. I am currently a Foreign Service Officer with the U.S. Department of State. I graduated from Barnard in 2017, so not too long ago, and I majored in economics with the political economy track and minored in Spanish and Latin American cultures. I also kind of had a winding experience trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life and my career. But I kind of knew early on that I wanted it to be internationally focused. I love learning languages and learning about the different cultures in the world. And I basically started to pursue that while I was at Barnard. During my junior year, I had the chance to study abroad in Barcelona. And that kind of solidified that going to other countries and, engaging in work in that way is something that I want to do. And so that kind of transferred into my senior year, getting a grant from the Alumna Grant, which I'm not sure if it's still called that, but there's a grant program, look it up, they'll help you do internships. But that helped me with an internship with the New York City Mayor's Office for International Affairs, which kind of catapulted me into the other aspects of the international arena. After that, I worked with the Consulate of Australia in New York, and then used that to transition into a role at the United Nations Children's Fund. And so I worked there for about 3.5 years, and then eventually was able to get a fellowship that enabled me to go to grad school and now work for the State Department. So happy to talk about any of those experiences, the grad school process, and how that ties into navigating a career and applying for fellowships and what that means.
Thank you so much, Lucia. And last but not least, Nina. Oh, Nina, you're muted.
Hi, sorry about that. So I am Nina Rothschild, and I graduated from Barnard in 1986, at which point in time, I think nobody else on this panel or in this virtual room was even born. My pathway from Barnard to government service was a bit circuitous. I was an English major at Barnard, and after Barnard, I earned a master's degree in English literature from Columbia. But a course that I took kind of on a whim during my junior year at Barnard landed up determining my life's professional course. In the spring of my junior year, I signed up for a course on introduction to the sociology of medicine. I really basically just needed another course, and this sounded reasonably interesting. And so I arrived on the first day of class, and I found it incredibly compelling. And in the following fall semester, I took 2 related courses on women, health and healthcare, and on caring for the mentally ill, treatment and policy. Loved all 3 of those courses. However, as I mentioned, I went to get my master's in English. And while I was getting my master's in English, I started thinking, I don't really want to do this for the rest of my life. I do not want to be a professor of English literature, and I don't want to wind up at, starting a job at Nevada State Community College and working up to a more prestigious institution, etc. I wanted to do something that's more alive and meaningful and also more collaborative. Public health is very collaborative. So I applied to Columbia School of Public Health, and I was accepted, and I was thrilled from the moment I arrived on campus. I earned my master's degree from the Department of Sociomedical Sciences and my doctorate from the Department of Health Policy and Management. And I currently work at the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. And I will be delighted to speak more about that later.
Thank you so much, Nina. And I think something that I often notice when I have graduates from Barnard speak on their career experience thus far is that a lot of times their major does not necessarily correlate to whatever path that they're on now. And I think that is a great comfort to students, knowing that, listen, the choice that you make right now doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be stuck in it for the rest of your life. So I think it's good that we're sharing our experiences in that way. So great, thank you all for sharing. Our next question that I have for you all is, what are some key skills or competencies that in your experience are essential to your field? And I will have anyone kind of start.
Well, I am happy to start since I just finished speaking. I guess I'll hog the screen. So there are 2 separate areas, and I think you really need to be competent in one or the other, or preferably both. Key skill number 1 is writing well. If you cannot write a coherent email to your colleagues so that they know what you're asking, if you cannot ask people, questions that they really understand what you're getting at, if you cannot devise a questionnaire, or the meanings of the individual questions are readily apparent to people of all different kinds of reading abilities and educational levels, then you have a problem. If you want to do research and evaluation and really delve deeply into epidemiology or biostatistics, of course, you also will benefit if you are a strong quantitative person. But you do not absolutely need to have that. You can make a very good career in public policy, without that. But as I say, if you are at all interested in research and evaluation, then definitely quantitative skills are important. Qualitative research skills are also important, but somewhat less. So there is less of a call for them.
I have to second what Nina said. Being able to write is very important in my role. I also like to write all of my own speeches. I feel like I got that Barnard education. I want to put it to use. I'd add 2 other things. One is a really simple one. I bet you, Sasha, could second me on this. Learning how to say no. I think as women and women that have a strong background, academic background, we like to say yes. We like to do everything, and really learning how to organize your day and organize what you can accomplish, and being able to say no to certain things is something that I had to work on, and I feel like I'm still working on. And I always suggest to everybody it's a good thing to learn how to do. And then third thing I would add, oh, I forgot my third thing. This is just like something I think with public policy, learning how to think through the steps that you need to take in order to get something done. That's a skill I see a lot of really good politicians have, and just people really successful in general. When I want to get a certain bill passed, or I even break it down and I want to get a certain person's support or a certain advocate to work with me on something, I try to think through all the steps that I need to take in order to get that to happen. And it's just a good tool that you can start using when you're in college, and will really help you in any role that you take.
I'll add that I think that collaboration is really key to success in your career. Part of that is writing, part of that is listening, part of that is saying no, right? But also being able to work with people, respect their point of view, where they've come from, and help shape the conversation and move it forward in a way that includes everybody and helps build support for your ideas is important. So you can start out with what you think is a great idea, collaborate with your colleagues, your friends, and refine that idea to make it even better, and then carry it forward strongly through that kind of process. And I think that's something that you learn in school, and it's exciting to think about exercising that in your career as you get started, and thinking about the kinds of people that you want to be surrounded by to have those conversations. I think an important thing in my life has been knowing that I'm working among people, or maybe working for people that I admire and that I can learn from, and finding those relationships to help develop your own skill set.
Yeah, Lizzie, that's really in line with what I was going to say. For anyone who's, lived in the freshman quad and had to figure out how to just live together with a group of people who come from really diverse backgrounds, that's hugely important in the work that I do. You're constantly having to, so much of my work is relationship building and really good listening skills, and really understanding, also being able to look in a room and ask yourself, like, who's not here, who should be, what voices aren't being heard that should be heard. I think that kind of questioning is definitely something that was encouraged at Barnard, being at an all women's college, for example. I'll also add just being a good consumer of information. And I don't just mean being able to read research, which is really important, and evaluate it. But also, as that also relates to who you're talking to, and understanding, like, what are the perspectives that they're bringing to this? What sort of biases are they bringing to this, right? And because when you're evaluating policy, or you're deciding whether to take a position on a certain bill, let's say, you really want to understand what are the potential unintended consequences, what's sort of like the underlying context of this issue, who's been informing this proposal, right? And where do they come from? And again, like, whose voices aren't being heard. So I think in whatever major you're in, whether you're an English major and you're reading a text, or you're an econ major or a psychology major and you're reading like scientific research, just being able to be a good consumer of information and a critical thinker is really key.
Okay, I sort of have a cheat sheet for this question, because with the State Department, we have a very clear set of skills and competencies that you have to have. And if you ever do apply, they're called the 13 dimensions of a Foreign Service officer. I'll put the link in the chat, but I'll highlight some of the ones that stick out to me, and they are similar to what the others have said, because writing is just such an important skill to have in this job. And honestly, I think in any job, it's important to really be able to, one, write well, and to edit your work and look at it very thoughtfully. But that being said, from most of my colleagues that I've met that have gone to Barnard, or my classmates, I wouldn't worry about writing too much, because I think at Barnard, a lot of people do build that skill anyway. So I think that's, just something that I will say that like, I think Barnard students typically tend to be really strong writers in that area. But another thing that also came up is communication. And for me, it's interpersonal and intercultural communication. It's really important to be able to talk to people who might be speaking English as a second language or have different cultural norms that don't relate to the ones that you grew up with, and having to, relate to your colleagues in that way. And with international affairs, hierarchy is a real thing. Everybody has a rank and a role, but you still have to treat everybody with the same amount of respect and kindness. And so that's something to kind of keep in mind as you develop your, way in the workplace. And another one I'll throw out there is being flexible and adaptable, because in my job and in any one in international affairs, there's crises that happen that just, throw your whole day, your whole month, perhaps your whole year off. And you just have to be able to be flexible and adapt on a professional level, but also on a personal level, because maybe because of this crisis, you have to evacuate a country at the last minute and move your whole family and change your phone number and do all the things that come with being in the international space. So that's really important.
Thank you all so much for sharing so far. And I think something that we really try to hammer home with students that we're advising with is that the coursework that you're doing especially at Barnard, but any institution of higher learning, those skills are transferable to a variety of industries. So you don't have to have the perfectly set up experience to be successful in the future, and particularly with writing. I hear that often as an advisor, why do I have to take this writing course now? Like, it'll pay off in the future, I promise. You want to make sure that you're doing it. But thank you all. So we're going to head over to our next question, which I think is particularly important considering the roles that you have within government and public policy. And so I'd like to hear a little bit of how the COVID-19 pandemic affected your professional practice. This could be included in your day-to-day work. It can be included with how you are serving communities in the areas that you're living in. So what are the ways that it has impacted your practice?
I can go. So at the beginning of the pandemic, it was really, really rough, especially for the communities that we work with, right? We knew that undocumented immigrant communities were going to be the hardest hit and least protected during the pandemic, and with the fewest resources and sources of relief. But what I really want to talk about is just the way advocacy has changed. So I live in Los Angeles, and our state capital is in Sacramento, which is a really long drive away or a short flight. And every year we are used to bringing thousands of people to the Capitol to lobby their representatives and meet with them in person. And this involves taking overnight buses and stuff like that. And in a really kind of interesting silver lining way, because of the pandemic, they had to allow all of those sort of lobby visits and meetings, as well as any sort of public comment opportunities for hearings, to go virtual. And so that actually made advocacy way more accessible to our communities. If we could get them an internet connection and a computer, they could make their voices heard without having to take a day off work, without having to travel, figure out childcare for their families. So when we would be lucky if we could get like 10 people to come with us to Sacramento for a particular hearing, we could have hundreds of people call in, sort of to the chagrin of some of the staffers in the Capitol, right, who then had to keep the lines open for hours and our meetings go on way longer. But I think it actually really opened the door to advocacy opportunities. And I would also say that, the racial uprisings around, the Black Lives Matter movement, as well as the pandemic, I think has gotten people more interested in advocacy and public participation. And so again, has just like really opened the doors, and I hope has made people feel like it's a lot easier to actually participate in our democracy. So yeah.
I will say on the flip side of that, from the advocates, I have to agree with Sasha. It's been wonderful. I think we saw a lot of our committee hearings go online. The State House, the state capitol in Rhode Island is usually filled with people coming to speak to you before session or with meetings happening. And it was really cool to, first scary to see it be very quiet. Unnerving to see all these hearings go over Zoom, but then great to see so many people be able to engage with us at the State House and talk on bills and work with us on legislation. That's been really cool to see. And it also, I will say, silver lining in all of the crazy political kind of world that we've been in. It's been great to see so many people who otherwise probably wouldn't have been so involved get involved and care more and take on issues, which has been great. So scary at first, but a good silver lining at the end.
I had the opportunity during the pandemic to form and join a political action committee that was sort of a side project, but because I had time during the pandemic, and other people did too, we were able to take on some advocacy work that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to do. That was an exciting thing that happened during that time.
So I'm happy to jump in. As I mentioned already, I work at the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. And in March of 2 years ago, basically, virtually the entire agency was sent to work from home. And I did not respond well to working from home. The majority of my colleagues loved it, but I found it kind of lonely. And I missed the kind of human interchange and, casual back and forth. Somehow meetings conducted virtually, I didn't really find as engaging as meetings conducted in person. So a few months later, in July of 2020, I just went back to the office. One of my roles in the health department's pandemic response involved answering some surveys on a weekly basis, and it was impossible to answer them without two screens at home. I had one computer monitor. Most of my colleagues have been out for the entire 2 years and are only now starting to return to the office. And of course, most of New York City went into hiding. But one specific role that I took on during the pandemic response involved serving as team leader at one of the health department's vaccine points of dispensing. We had them in every borough of the city, and I was sent out into the Rockaways. And so every day we would have up to approximately 1,200 people pass through and get vaccinated. We were only doing Moderna. And I loved the opportunity for leadership. And I was thrilled to be out and about, my fellow New Yorkers. It also had the nice boon. If you're working at one of these pods, you could get vaccinated really early, like in January. So that was just a very nice side benefit for me. But personally, I did, as I say, not respond well to working from home. It just was too isolated. And I was thrilled to be back in the community and, meeting with other components of the vaccination team who were from other city agencies, as well as from the health department, whom I would never have met under other circumstances. It was really just a wonderful opportunity. I was speaking to a colleague who also served as a team leader, and she said that after giving birth, it was, other than giving birth, it was like the most meaningful experience she had ever had to serve as one of these team leaders. So it really added a new dimension to my responsibilities at that point in time. I did it for approximately 2.5 months.
I'll jump in. So at the beginning of the pandemic, I was still working at UNICEF, and I was working at as a public partnerships officer, and basically the entirety of my work shifted because all of our programs had to adapt to securing funding for personal protective equipment. and figuring out a mechanism to obtain funding and distribution for COVID vaccines via COVAX. So the whole job kind of changed, but especially the aspect of it that changed was the fact that we were doing this from our living rooms and our bedrooms and adapting to online learning or online working. It wasn't really common at the organization for people to do flexible work arrangements or work from home at all. And so I think we were forced to do it because of the pandemic, but a big outcome of this was realizing that flexible work arrangements and working from home is possible. And that, yes, there are people that, for me, I also thrive in the in-person environment, but I do get something out of being able to manage my day at home and meetings and beyond that way. So I think the pandemic kind of created that opportunity, but also solidified the fact that working from home and giving people the option to choose is here to stay. But yeah, there was a lot of travel and conferences involved in my job before, and all of that had to shift to be online, but it worked out. I don't know if any of you guys have been down to the Midtown East area during September, but every year we usually have the United Nations General Assembly that takes up a whole neighborhood and makes it really difficult to navigate that area. But that whole program and conference shifted online and it worked. And so I think that's a great outcome.
Thank you all so much. And Nina, I absolutely just same boat as you when we switched to remote work. So it was similar within higher education and did not do well with me. I could not work with one screen. It was not fun, but now I think the main kind of idea here, or kind of a similar theme, is accessibility. And I think that was huge for a lot of communities and just across industries. So thank you all for sharing that. So next up, I'm curious to hear about your personal experiences and how have the challenges and opportunities created through diversity, equity, and inclusion work play out in your current roles within government and/or public policy?
I can start on this one because, well, the fellowship that I received for joining the State Department is a diversity program. And so its goal is to get more people from different racial, socioeconomic, gender, and all different types of backgrounds into the State Department and the Foreign Service. And so for me, I'm really proud of being involved in a program like that, but also that kind of recognizes that there's a lot of gaps in that area still. Like most of the ambassadors and people at the higher levels are white, affluent men. And so often I'm still, the only woman in the room. I have to explain my last name and my background and what it all means. But I think in international affairs, especially because part of the game is human rights and, supporting the cultural diversity and these kinds of values, that there are people interested or attempting to, engage in the work of trying to make these spaces more welcoming. And I think, that has been more noticeable with the State Department, because when I was at UNICEF, I was working with people from, I think, like 70 different countries, and most of them were actually women, because it's actually a lot of women that work in the development space. That just tends to be the trend. And so they were really supportive of me and each other and the organization, especially. Anybody can take 5.5 months of leave. And that's just something that was incredible for me to see, because it's not something we have in policy right now. And so, I think finding places that support different people and different backgrounds it was a priority to me, and it's something that I'm continuing to focus and strive for.
I can go next, but before I do, just because no one's on camera, like if any of you guys have questions or want to put them in the chat, it would be helpful because I feel like I'm talking to a blank screen. But after working at a lot of different nonprofits, I was really lucky in that, I told myself that I really wanted to work at a place that was led by people who are directly impacted by the issues that they were working on. And so I'm really fortunate to get to work in an organization that is where the vast majority of people are women identifying people of color, where it's led by people of color. As a white woman, I have had an opportunity to continue on my journey, right, of like understanding my role in this work and how to be supportive and act in solidarity with my colleagues as well as my community members. And so I think that that's really important. And I think especially in public policy, we talked a lot about all of the different kind of skills that are good for you to have, right? Around critical thinking and writing and relationships and all that kind of stuff. But I think what's also really important is that lived experience, because, you could have people research, issues around domestic worker rights, for example, for years and years and years. But that can't compare to the experience of actually working as one or having a loved one who has worked as one, and really understanding those issues deeply. And so I think it's really important that we prioritize and center lived experience when it comes to setting public policy, because no one can really know what those issues are like unless you've lived them on that deeper level. And that experience is, or at least should be, as valued as whatever sort of academic credentials you might have.
I'll go next. Or Nina, you want to go next?
Please go right ahead.
Sure. Okay. When I first ran for office and when I first won, I was the only person under 30 that was serving in the state legislature. Women were in the vast minority. And we were told a lot of crazy things like, stop worrying about Roe v. Wade, it'll never be overturned, or why are you pushing for pay equity? And something we really worked to build over the past 10 years is getting more women to run, working to help more women win, and then working together in the House floor to get these bills passed. So, I'm proud to say that we did pass a codification of Roe v. Wade and remove some terrible anti-choice legislation off the books here in Rhode Island. We were able to pass a great pay equity bill. Again, I'll credit Barnard with this. Barnard really teaches you how to work well with other women, which the more you're out there in the real world, you realize is a hard skill that a lot of women don't have as much. I think especially in politics, women were always kind of pitted against one another. And it was great to see, be part of the work over the past 10 years to really get the women in the House to work together, really work towards getting this legislation passed, and continuing to help other minority voices in the room, other people of color, new voices, younger voices, working to help them have a better start than a lot of us did, and make sure that they feel comfortable in the House, that they have support and are feeling heard.
So I guess that leaves me to chime in. So here at the New York City Health Department, we began having a very, very strong emphasis on diversity and inclusion under a previous health commissioner, Dr. Mary Bassett, who is currently the New York State Health Commissioner. And there were a lot of required trainings, and you can go to all the trainings you want. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to integrate or incorporate what you learn into your daily work, but I think that is the general hope and expectation. For me, my turn to sort of get my hands on that kind of material and actually work with it came when I volunteered to do some qualitative data analysis. The overall initiative for increasing diversity at the agency is called Race to Justice. And in the division in which I work, which is the Division of Disease Control, there is an action team that is charged with taking issues related to diversity and inclusion within our division. There was a big survey that was released. It was answered by hundreds and hundreds of people, and there were some qualitative questions included. So I took a look at the qualitative data, looked for themes that were frequently appearing. People were identifying things that they thought, were being focused on excessively, were useless, were potentially helpful, but not being approached correctly, and so on and so forth. So I kind of liked getting my hands on the data. And but it is something that is very, very much in the air and has been for a long time at the health department.
I can say the same thing for the mayor's office. I mean, I think New York City government has, done its best to be inclusive and sensitive about all the different kinds of people that live in New York City. And our office is focused on climate, and I think in the last 18 months has really taken the moment to sort of, instead of having sort of a general interest in diversity and inclusion and how our programs affect disadvantaged or uninvested communities, really trying to codify that work into documents and thinking through how we incorporate it into all the different kinds of work that we do. And then I think probably I'll just say most recently with the new administration, Eric Adams is the new mayor of New York City. As a result, our office has been reorganized. And this concept of environmental justice is seen as not just a positive outcome of climate action, but as something that's really front and center and guides the work. So while it's sort of, I think, been in the air for a long time, recent months has been an opportunity to really center that work and focus all of our programs around it.
Okay, great. Thank you all for sharing. And please feel free to chime in if you have something additional to add to that. But I think for this next question, you all kind of touched on it briefly. But I'm curious to hear a little bit more about how your invisible or visible identities kind of play into or played out in your career thus far. And anyone can start.
I am definitely not going to be the first speaker on this one because this was the question that stumped me the most when I was looking at what you had sent. So I'll let somebody else take the floor.
I can start. I went to Barnard and had, of course, a liberal arts education like everybody here. I went to graduate school, learned how to be a designer, and worked in design for a long time. But I didn't work at an architecture office, right? Would have been the same, like the setting for which I had been trained. I worked in an engineering office. But even then, the engineering office was kind of specialized. It's a little bit too much to explain here, but it was an office that did very particular kinds of engineering / architectural design work. All great experiences, and what it led to is me having, I think, an ability to kind of move between professions and be somebody who is able to be a generalist, right? Good at like lots of a variety of kinds of things and being able to wear different caps. So I think there's sort of an invisible professional identity there, and that you can translate information, you can go between knowing enough about technical topics, but being able to talk to people who have no idea how to approach a technical topic. And I think that's something that really comes from the sophisticated education that you receive at a place like Barnard, right? And being able to move among a really intelligent and motivated cohort of students. So I think there's something invisible about that skill set, which I value for myself and I appreciate seeing in others. I'll also say, because we're in a setting of all women, I'm a mother, and like figuring out how to be a parent and have a career and thinking about how that feeds into the way that you approach work in terms of being something that you do in your life, not the only thing you do in your life, but also thinking about how it gives you a perspective about how to manage people or interact with people is, I think, valid, and it's something that I think a lot of people on this call will be figuring out in the next 10 or 15 years of their life.
I'm happy to jump in. I think when you run for political office, and the trend I think a lot of us have seen is that you very much have to share everything about yourself. People want to really know who you are. I find sometimes people want to vote for me because not necessarily because of a stance or position, but more because they feel like they know me. And I will admit that I struggle with that. Social media is a really big thing for politicians, and I find that everybody thinks they need to write, how they feel or what they think on a subject on Twitter. And something I really learned is finding my comfort with all of this. And I don't share that much, or I don't feel like I always share, but I do try to do as much as I can to make sure people know who I am. They know where I stand on issues. But I will say I struggle a little bit with the social media aspect that comes with political office. Yeah, I don't, and I see, students have that. I don't know if that's something you guys struggle with as students. I know back in my day, we kind of had like a couple social media sites, but not too many. I will say I think it's something that follows you throughout your career. And I think it's good to kind of find your comfort zone while you're in college.
So for me, even though I work in the international affairs space, everybody gets my name wrong. And that's okay. But for me, I make it a point to correct people because my parents gave me my name for a reason, and it's a fundamental part of my identity. And that is a conversation I'm always having, and I'm always going to continue to have. But I think it's important to be really thoughtful and intentional when you do those basic questions of what is your name and where are you from? Because my answer to where am I from is Massachusetts. And even though I know that's not always the question being asked, you usually can have a more thoughtful conversation when you explain, I am from Massachusetts, but my parents are from Mexico and the Dominican Republic, and that is where my name comes from. And it is not Lucia. I am not Italian. I may appear that way, but that is not my background. And so I think not everybody is forced to have that conversation, but I don't see it as something kind of annoying or exhausting. Yes, it's repetitive, but for me, it's kind of a moment in which I can reflect and, assert my background and identity right from the beginning.
Perfect. Thank you all so much for sharing. Oh, go right ahead, Nina.
So I was just going to follow up on the remarks a moment ago about social media. I think I only became aware of how really destructive it can be, particularly during the Trump administration. I'm sure we're not supposed to talk about politics in this format, but I didn't really, I think, fully appreciate what a divisive force it is, and I also recognize the dangers of becoming addicted to it, which I think many of us are these days. But regarding more directly a response to the question about identity, I am and have always been a real lover of animals, and I worry a great deal about the environment, and I've stopped worrying about the polar bears because it's just too upsetting, but I worry about everything else. And for the first time, really, during the pandemic, I started thinking about the logical linkage between the environment, sort of my inner passion, and public health, because there was a lot of conversation going on about humans encroaching on animal habitats and animals having fewer places to go and being in greater proximity to human beings, and bringing their diseases, which human beings may, have no antibodies against, into the population. I think there's still some disagreement about where exactly the COVID pandemic, whether it was an open air market, whether it was that laboratory, research laboratory in close proximity to the market, et cetera, but it really brought home to me how devastation of the environment really isn't, impacts all of us, animals and people. And yeah, it's really in a pretty critical place right now.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I have to agree with you, Nina. I mean, I think in it being in an academic space and being from a women's institution, we're often thrusted into political spaces. So I think it's not a subject that we are afraid to kind of tackle on. But thank you all so much. We are shockingly kind of running out of time. So for students, if you have questions, start thinking about it. You can put them in the chat. And as you're thinking, I have one last question for our panelist here. What advice would you give a Barnard student who wants to enter your field? And what does the job market look like currently from your perspective?
So in public health, the job market is fantastic. I would recommend that you do earn an MPH or possibly another degree like an MPA. It'll be hard to move beyond a very introductory level, lower level job without it. I would also strongly encourage students to have a variety of working experiences and also try to find a place where they can serve as a leader. So in public health, we have a lot of people who did the Peace Corps. If you're interested in the Peace Corps, that is a great place to start. At one point, we had a reunion of former Peace Corps volunteers. I was not one, but the unit in which I was working had a lot, and I was even invited to join them for lunch. But when I saw there was no dessert, I kind of disappeared. But whether you've worked in a hospital system or you have worked overseas, not in the Peace Corps, but you have volunteered with an organization, Africa, the Philippines, South America, whatever, those experiences are great. But if you can find something where you can hold some leadership ability, people will really want to see that when you are on the job market. It's great if you get A's in all your courses in the MPH, and if you want to go on for a DRPH, that's terrific. But they really want to see not only what have you learned, but what have you done.
I actually want to pose a question. It's great to see so many faces. Are any of you seniors that are on here with us? Just like raise your hand if you are. No? Oh, you guys are really ahead of the game. Oh, we see a couple. There we go. Well, to those who aren't, you guys are very ahead of the game. To the seniors, I will say this. I remember my parents and my sister always saying to me, I'm talking about what do you want to do after college, and saying to me, what is it that you want to do? What do you like to do? And I had a really hard time answering that question. Sometimes I will second what Nina says. I think, Barnard being located in New York City, you have so many great options as far as internships available to you. I think it's great sometimes to figure out what you don't want to do. That can sometimes be just as helpful as figuring out what you want to do. To those that are younger, take advantage of those internship opportunities. Barnard is great at helping you find those and get that experience. But yeah, I would say, working towards figuring out what you want to do, sometimes not knowing is not that terrible of a place to be, and figuring out what you don't want to do is also a great start. Also, just like little things that you like I like talking to people. I like working with others. I like working on policy. Those are things that kind of got me into running for office myself, and seats are always available. Keep an eye, and I always suggest that you go for it. And I'm here to help if anybody has any questions about that.
Thank you so much. Other panelists, we have some questions in the chat, but any advice to a Barnard student?
Yeah, my advice it's pretty simple: be persistent and flexible. In my experience, I applied for about 200 different positions before I found one that was full-time, full salary, benefits, the whole package. And that was hard to take in because that means that there were a lot of rejections thrown in there or things that didn't work out for me. And I just got used to it and kept going because I mean, these fields are competitive, but that doesn't mean that there's not a place for you in them. And I think the flexibility part is also, you may have an idea of a specific organization or a type of work that you want to do, but if you can find anything tangentially related that you can use to maybe leverage yourself and then apply for that specific job later, I think it's important to just take as many opportunities as you can and as come up. And I think another element of that is also like being confident and not worrying too much about if you have every single qualification in a job application, because that doesn't matter. I mean, it matters to be well qualified, but not to tie yourself exactly to what's in a job description. It's really important to kind of just know your worth. And if you think you can do a job well, apply for it. And my last thing I'll leave you with is negotiate your salary, because that is obviously something we still have to work on in terms of the gender pay gap and other pay gaps that exist. I'll tell you, I didn't negotiate my first salary and I had to catch up every single time afterwards. And so it's not an easy thing. It's uncomfortable and it's awkward, but you should do it. You don't have to do it, but you should do it. And there are resources to help you with it. I think I did reach out to Beyond Barnard and the career office at my grad school to help walk me through that. So yeah, that's what I'll leave you with.
Thank you so much. And in our last minute together, I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. We had a question from Moya in the chat, and they were wondering if there were any classes or a class you took at Barnard that you found important and constructive to beginning your careers. And I know Sasha shared a course that fed her soul in the chat, which is an amazing way to put it. Any classes really quickly that you would like to share?
I will actually put a push for both the first year seminar and first year English. It teaches you how to, those classes help me read through legislation. It helps you tackle, pieces of writing, learn how to speak on them, and gives you the confidence to speak on them, which has helped me throughout my entire career. So I'd give a big push to those, and a special shout out to Professor Lynn Carey Maida. If anybody has her, she's phenomenal.
So I already mentioned that there were several courses, one of which in particular, the first one influenced my entire career direction, but I'm afraid that I graduated so long ago that those courses are probably no longer offered, but maybe there's some other version. But I would just say, experiment, go out on a limb. Something might sound kind of interesting. You don't really know about it. It's not in your major. Maybe it'll, fill a distribution requirement or whatever. Try it. You never know.
Thank you all so much. And we are right at 2 o'clock, so we are going to wrap up. Thank you so much to our panelists who have joined us. It has been incredibly insightful, and I'm really thankful that we had you here to share your experiences. And thank you for our students who have showed up today. Expect follow-ups from myself probably regarding the program. And I am available at Beyond Barnard if you have any more questions regarding the program. So thank you all. It was so nice to meet you. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for organizing, and thank all of you for attending.
Oh, of course. Talk to you all soon.
Hey, you bet.